Hi everyone. So the patch went live last night and I was there to try out the new Natalya Demon Hunter immediately. I had it already prepared and set up and theory crafted everything. And it turns out it's not really as good as we had anticipated. So the reason for that is mainly that there were several undocumented nerfs to the by far best rune, the lightning rune that we were playing on the PTR and that we were theory crafting with. So there are various effects that do not work for this rune anymore, and that was not communicated in the patch notes. So it turns out Natalya is not going to be like some Omega Blaster S tier build anymore, but probably just like some comfortable, like around A tier, pretty balanced, pretty solid build. That doesn't really impress anyone, I imagine. Especially in a world where we have Nova and Meteor and these kind of builds. But I did manage to clear this 140 here. This was literally like my first run, so I was not really playing this well. I did have really good gear, I did have pretty high Paragon, but I think overall this build ends up somewhere on pretty much roughly the same level as Marauder Demon Hunter, which is actually like in a fairly good spot balance-wise in my opinion. So while it's not going to be the meta for anything right now, it is another option for Demon Hunters, and we can choose one or the other build to push on the solo leaderboards. And we actually cleared 150s of that in groups as well. It's actually pretty hilarious because the patch went live and I was doing a little bit of testing, and then I decided to just like send 140 and I cleared this in time here with no cornet actually. So there's definitely quite some potential for pushing on a higher end. And I managed to hit the rank 1 of this because there was simply no one else clearing any rift. And after that, like 5 minutes later or something, they locked the leaderboards and started the new era. So the new era didn't actually start with the patch, but it was a little bit afterwards. So I managed to take this rank 1 here and beat all these like Natalya rapid fire players and these kind of things. So that is a pretty hilarious turn of events. I already mentioned this lightning rune. So one of the main issues is that the 6-piece bonus doesn't work with the lightning rune, and neither does the pulling effect for the caltrops. So you see here, these enemies are like flying in sometimes. So with good timing, you can actually make really good pixel pulls with this build. In fact, this actually enables a new support Demon Hunter setup that can pull enemies. A little bit similar to a Z-Barb, just not as good. I'm going to cover that in a separate video because there is a lot of details that go into it. But overall, this pulling effect is quite nice, but it doesn't work with the lightning. You don't get a stacking damage, you don't get good synergy with the Demon's Demise, so that rune is just completely out. And now you play either the cold or the fire. What you see here is I have Strafe on the bar. This is not actually like a spin to win build like a God Demon Hunter. You see here I'm like running mostly, and Strafe is only used if I get blocked by enemies or to trigger those traps, because you have to use a hated spinner to activate them. So usually just like tap it once to get the explosion and move on. So the speed farming actually went a lot more smooth than the pushing. I think this is actually fairly comparable to other top speed farming builds on Demon Hunter. So it's probably a bit weaker than like God and UE and Marauder in farming, but if you really like this new Spectre build, it feels a lot more smooth. You run really fast, you don't really have so much trouble with surviving and these kind of things because the build is not really overly tanky. So it just kind of works. But yeah, in general, it's a lot of effort. You have to pay attention to this, and you should only really play this in farming if you really like the Spectre playstyle. And what you see here is some freeman pushing that we've done. So here I actually played the fire rune and I used evasive fire to trigger the caltrops. So this is another rune that uses a hated generator instead of a hated spender to trigger them. And this made the entire setup a lot more comfortable to play because I was not constantly running low on resources, and I was not moving around accidentally because I pressed strafe and then I would move out of an Oculus ring, or my endless walk setup would lose damage. So instead we actually had the support Demon Hunter here putting down the caltrops, and the support Demon Hunter's caltrops work for the damage buff from the 2-piece Natalya bonus. So I don't have to have caltrops on the bar here, and I don't accidentally pull enemies around, these kind of things. And that was actually relatively solid. So you can see here, this 150 was like no problem whatsoever. And in a season 28 scenario, I would say this would be a kind of comparable result at maybe 1500 to 2k paragons or so. So the season theme is pretty strong. You get a lot of extra damage, you get those shrines, you get those pylons. There's definitely some shenanigans you can do to make this quite powerful. And these 150s will be not such a huge deal if you want to have a Demon Hunter DPS. But it doesn't really beat like Nova or Meteor. So keep that in mind. Those builds are going to be significantly stronger and you can do 150s way faster, way easier at very low paragon already in the season 28. In general, as it always goes with these new builds, especially if they're very complicated like this new Natalya, there will be a lot of things that we discover over time. So obviously we just tried it out for a few hours last night, and the season is starting on Friday, so there's not really any time left to try that much more and figure everything out in detail. So I guess over time, as the season progresses, we're gonna have people playing this, I'm gonna play it, and we're gonna figure out like 327 different tricks to make this a bit better, which will not be enough to just make this like an S tier build suddenly, but overall it will be pretty solid. I will have an updated video guide for you guys probably tomorrow, so I'm going to work on that later, but I also have a lot of other things still to do until season start, so I'm very much in a rush with a lot of other stuff to do. I also went through the Maxwell guide again to update everything with the new findings, so if you have read that guide already on Maxwell, then I recommend you to go check it out again. So I have done at least the non-seasonal version, but the season 28 version is plus minus exactly the same in all variants, so there's not really that much to see. And I'm gonna have that ready later. So I updated the planners, so it's a cold build now, and we have a lot more explanations in the gameplay section. So I really fleshed that out a bit because there's a lot of details that you need to know to play this effectively. And I also fleshed out all of the variants a little bit, including the group trash killer if you want to play that. So if you have read the guide before, then I have the changelog here at the bottom, so you can kind of figure out what I changed and where to look. And this also concludes this video here. So the new Natalya doesn't really impress anyone, I guess, but it is a pretty solid build, I guess. It's definitely something worth trying out if you like this spike trap playstyle. It is very unique, so this is really one thing I like about the build, and I'm quite looking forward to trying it out later in the season as well, to get a feel for the playstyle and then maybe learn more things about it and push it to the maximum, as I always do. So stay tuned for that. This also means that Demon Hunters is not going to be like the S tier class, I guess, of all time in this season, because the solo pushing potential is simply a little bit lower now. But outside of that, Demon Hunter is going to be a really solid class to play with a bunch of really good builds. God Demon Hunter, UE, Natalya, Marauder, Support Demon Hunter. So nothing really to worry about, I think. Hope you enjoyed this video here. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys next time.